Welcome back to Tariff and Trade Perspectives. I'm Kara Selby. Joining me today is Laura Wood, our National Defense Leader. Thank you for joining me, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
Laura, when I first asked you to come on today, you had a really good question for me. You said, what do tariffs have to do with defense? When I was reading the Fair and Reciprocal Tariff Executive Order released by President Trump on Liberation Day, there were several statements in the executive order that linked tariffs to scaling the manufacturing capacity in the defense sector. And let me just read you the quote. It said, because the U.S. has supplied so much military equipment to other countries, U.S. stockpiles are too low to meet national defense interests. It went on to say, it's critical to scale manufacturing capacity in the defense industrial sector. What are the significance of these comments to you?
I think it's really highlighting what the U.S. administration is thinking about in terms of its supply chains and the need to really scale and prepare. As you know, with the war in Ukraine, stockpiles were diminished, as they say, but it really shone a light on the need for examining how are our supply chains resilient, how are they secure, and where are the new sources, given the reshaping of the geopolitical landscape. So I think that's the first thing it calls out. The second thing it calls out is the depletion itself. We're seeing in defense organizations around the world that stockpiles are low, and we're seeing that given the geopolitical climate, there's a new vigor in investing in defense. So I think these are all tied together. But most importantly, it's where is the supply coming from? And then how much of that could actually be within America and manufactured in America? And that's another big focus that we're seeing with the Trump administration.
The executive order also called on developing advanced manufacturing technologies and having a large upstream manufacturing ecosystem without relying heavily on imports. How do you think the landscape is changing for the Canadian defense sector?
First, I think we need to talk about the NATO contribution. Everyone's aware that Canada's been short of its 2% NATO contribution. We need to increase our NATO spending to get us to our 2%. It means that we have a big opportunity in Canada to decide and to work with policymakers on how we organize nationwide to participate in the expansion of our defense industrial base. In Canada, we have incredible rare earths. We have manufacturing companies, and we have steel, and we have the inputs. And so I think coming together and working with defense organizations to see how our ecosystem could evolve would be a great path forward for Canada.
I think I've read the U.S. has invested in Canadian critical minerals. Should Canada be doing the same?
Well, I think it's a great strategic question. There was an example, I think it was last year, possibly sooner, but where Department of Defense actually invested in Canadian mines. And that's part of a strategy to secure the supply chain. Why wouldn't Canada do the same? And maybe we are. I think these are questions we need to look at strategically.
Right. How can Canadian companies and policymakers take advantage of the opportunities created in the increase in defense spending?
I want to start with policymakers, because I think this is where we have a really important moment in Canadian history. I would say policymakers need to work with defense to examine the capabilities that are needed in this ecosystem. There are players already, but there are a lot of players that would like to be involved that have capability, whether it's in steel manufacturing, for example, or parts manufacturing, or rare earths or mines. So if policymakers understand the capability required, they can then engage industry. Policy should be simple and accessible. We want our Canadian ecosystem to thrive at this moment.
What about the Canadian companies?
If I were in any of these industries, I'd be wanting to know what are those capabilities that are needed, and then how does my organization make investments to that end? And I would encourage Canadian industry to really get involved. I see many are doing that already, but I would say attend conferences, engage in the ecosystem, and be part of the conversation of how this is shaped, because ultimately we're going to create it ourselves, and we're at the very front of this transformation. And I want to say that it's an epic level of transformation, certainly in my lifetime.
What do you think are the essential elements of scaling the defense base?
I think that we could easily say technology. What we are seeing in Ukraine is technological warfare as much as we're seeing traditional warfare. There's kind of a nexus coming together of cutting-edge, state-of-the-art technology informing decision makers, and also more classic styles of warfare. And I think we're all learning from that worldwide. But I would say in Canada, technology is really key. Canadian Armed Forces need to have state-of-the-art technology. They need to be skilled in that. They use an expression called overmatched. In addition to that, we have to think about AI, the requirements and infrastructure for it, secure cloud. Allies want to be interoperable. This is really key to intelligence sharing and delivery in theater or battlefield. That's an essential component. And data, I can't stress enough the importance of data in this story. We say it's the new currency, but data drives decision power, bottom line. And defense need good quality, high integrity data, and they need it in real time. And there's the kind of data that we know more traditionally that gives efficiency to defense. So if you can think about what a 30% or 50% increase in efficiency in supply chain planning would do to frontline delivery, it's pretty significant.
That's pretty incredible.
And so we have to think about it from all lenses, not just the theater, but also operations, operational excellence, and operational readiness. Then there's cloud transformation. And what does it take to have a sovereign cloud? What does it take to have high security around cloud? For many countries are high priority investment areas. Underpinning all of this is the workforce transformation that's occurring. In Canada and elsewhere, recruiting for our Canadian Armed Forces is essential. It's probably the most important priority in defense right now, and great progress is being made.
Very, very interesting. Laura, after our long discussion today, you can really see, as we bring it back, how tariffs and the defense sector are interconnected.
Definitely. I think it's important to note that even though defense spend and defense equipment is exempt from tariffs, the overall ecosystem participation can be stimulated by these. I also think Canadian companies have a big opportunity to think about not only participation in Canada, but their exports to Europe, to NATO, and the US. So I think there's big potential for our Canadian industry ahead.
Thank you very much, Laura. That was a very powerful discussion.
Thank you.